In the decades since the guns of World War II fell silent, a deeper and quieter war has persisted. One fought not with tanks or rifles, but with silence, omission, and the steady disappearance of truth. Beneath the official histories and memorials lies a second archive: sealed vaults, misfiled cables, burned photographs, and testimonies that never reached a tribunal. The stories buried there do not fit the clean narrative of victory or liberation. They are fragments of operations that never officially happened, men and women who vanished without record, and technologies that appeared decades before they should have existed. Each file, once opened, reveals another layer of contradiction, a paper trail leading not to clarity, but to a darkness preserved by those sworn to guard it. This is the history that was never meant to be remembered. Chapter 1. The Disappearance of Operation Harbinger. On April 19, 1945, 3 weeks before Germany's surrender, a coded directive left the Office of Strategic Services Station in Paris under the seal of Colonel Henry Wallace, Special Operations Branch. The message authorized the immediate deployment of a 5-man convoy from the 3rd Army Intelligence Detachment to the Harz Mountains under the operational codename Harbinger. Their stated objective: recovery of prioritized scientific assets and documentation related to advanced weapons research. No further specification was provided. The team's commander, Major Robert Hale, had served in counterintelligence since Sicily. He was known for discretion and the habit of burning field notes rather than sending them through channels. The last confirmed sighting of Hale's unit came from a requisition record at the US motor pool in Kassel, showing 2 Dodge command cars and a captured German half-track departing east at 04:30 hours. Weather reports from that morning describe heavy fog and intermittent artillery fire from isolated Wehrmacht holdouts. A local farmer later recalled seeing American vehicles near the old mining road above Ilsenburg. Men in strange uniforms, carrying large sealed crates, moving quickly before dawn. 2 days later, a Soviet patrol entered the same sector. Their after-action report noted fresh tracks, broken ice, and traces of burned fuel. They found no bodies, no vehicles, and no crates. Declassified OSS memoranda dated June 12, 1945, make brief reference to Harbinger, status unresolved. One attached communication from Major Thomas Devereux, Logistics Section, mentions non-standard containment equipment shipped from a captured laboratory near Nordhausen to an undisclosed US airfield in Belgium. These entries are crossed out in red pencil and marked void. Yet, in 1946, when the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency compiled the initial list for Operation Paperclip, 3 German engineers from Nordhausen appeared under aliases not traceable to any existing personnel records. Each bore a matching note: prior contact, Harbinger. The inconsistencies grow sharper in post-war logistics. Aerial photographs from 1947, taken during a US geological survey mission, captured faint excavation marks and a circular concrete platform near the Ilsenburg forest. The structure appears newly sealed, consistent with post-blast cement hardening. No entry exists in local rebuilding records. When questioned in 1951, German forestry officials claimed ignorance, though one recalled an area fenced off by British engineers who spoke American. Subsequent CIA internal report classified under recovery operations, Germany Zone C identified a restricted facility in the same coordinates. Annotated only. Recovered materials transferred per Directive E746 The directive itself has never been found. In 1952, Senator William Noland questioned Defense Department officials regarding missing scientific cargo, reported during the post-war repatriation of assets. The transcript of the closed hearing includes one mention of Project Erebus. When pressed, an Air Force intelligence officer described it as a European field retrieval unrelated to atomic research. Nolan's line of inquiry was abruptly redirected to budgetary matters. That term, Erebus, reappears twice more. Once in an Air Material Command memo dated 1954, referencing thermal anomaly testing, and once in a debrief of a German physicist, Dr. Erich Voss, who stated under oath that he had been detained for work on Erebus, the energy cell, before being released and resettled in Virginia. No agency ever admitted employing him. By 1960, Operation Harbinger existed only in fragments: a vanished convoy, erased manifests, and a set of coordinates in the Harz where the soil remains chemically altered to this day. Independent historian Dr. Martin Roebuck attempted to trace the missing reports through National Archives Record Group 226. He discovered entire folders labeled "removed prior to accession." In 1978, during a congressional review of unauthorized archival destruction, a Defense Department witness claimed certain foreign material transfers were omitted from inventory due to national security reclassification. No further elaboration followed. Locals in Ilsenburg still speak of the American fire pit, an area of scorched ground where nothing grows. In 1989, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, East German environmental inspectors conducted soil tests during reclamation of the border zone. Their analysis found elevated traces of vanadium and lithium isotopes inconsistent with known munitions. The results were quietly forwarded to Bonn and never released publicly. A scanned copy surfaced decades later through a leak from the Stasi archives. On the final page, in handwritten English, a marginal note reads, "Sample matches US flight debris 1947. Roswell analysis. Do not cross-report." The coincidence has since fueled endless speculation. But even within official circles, mention of Harbinger triggers unease. Former CIA logistics officer Frank Meredith, interviewed in 1993 for an internal oral history project, described a conversation with his superior at Fort Detrick. "He told me there were shipments that came in from Europe under diplomatic seal, metal cylinders, small, too heavy for size. No markings, no manifests. He said one was labeled H1. When I asked what it was, he just said, 'Don't ask again. It's Harbinger material.'" The recording was later expunged from the transcript, replaced with the notation, "Content sensitive, not cleared for release." In 2005, an independent researcher named Anne Leland located a deteriorated film reel in a surplus auction lot marked War Department, Training Division. The reel contained grainy footage of American soldiers inspecting an underground chamber lined with frost, light flickering over sealed canisters. A clipboard briefly visible in frame lists, Operation Harbinger, Site 2. Forensic analysis dated the film stock to mid-1945. The authenticity remains contested, but its contents match the descriptions from the lost Nordhausen manifests. No physical evidence of the convoy's fate has been recovered. The US Army's official position, reaffirmed in 2017, states that Operation Harbinger is not recognized as a sanctioned military activity. Yet, requests under the Freedom of Information Act return with identical phrasing. Records exist but are exempt from disclosure under national defense exemption. The phrasing itself confirms what the official denial rejects, that there are indeed records. If one were to walk the narrow forest road above Ilsenburg today, the air still carries the smell of old cordite after rain. A rusted gate, welded shut, guards the entrance to a depression in the earth that leads to nothing on any map. Local children call it the American Cave. Beyond the barrier, the ground sinks into darkness, littered with fractured concrete slabs, stamped with serial numbers long erased by time. Somewhere beneath that earth, if the remaining fragments are true, lies whatever Major Hale and his men were sent to retrieve. A technology, an artifact, or an experiment too dangerous to claim victory over. Operation Harbinger was not lost to time. It was buried deliberately, its silence maintained not by forgetfulness, but by design. Chapter 2. The Ghost Station at Vistula Line. In February 1944, deep within the winter-cloaked plains of occupied Poland, British monitoring posts in Cairo and Bletchley Park began intercepting faint, repetitive Morse bursts on a narrow frequency, 6.772 MHz, an abandoned German channel thought inactive since the previous year. The transmissions consisted of irregular groups of letters, repeated precisely every 6 hours. The origin was triangulated near the Vistula River, a sector the Wehrmacht had largely evacuated months earlier. The signals were attributed to a defunct relay outpost, likely destroyed during the Soviet advance. Yet the transmission continued, steady, mechanical, and unchanging. Within the monitoring logs, the site earned a name whispered by analysts who found no rational source: the Ghost Station. By March, the British Special Communications Unit in London dispatched an urgent report to the War Cabinet under the heading Anomalous Signals, Central Poland. The memo, labelled Strictly Secret, contained 6 decoded fragments. 4 consisted of indecipherable letters. The other 2, after pattern analysis, formed partial German phrases. Himmellinie gesichert, Intersendung bleibt. Both were consistent with Wehrmacht field transmissions circa 1943. but the frequency's continuous precision, its unwavering interval, suggested an automated or remote system, not a human operator. What baffled technicians was the equipment's apparent survival. Power grids in that region had been obliterated by both sides. No intact station was recorded within 50 kilometers. On April 8, 1944, an RAF reconnaissance Mosquito overflew the coordinates believed to host the source. Its film captured an abandoned rail junction west of Deblin, partially buried under snowdrift, with one undamaged signal mast still upright. Intelligence analysts marked it as a likely relay site, designation Target 11B. Plans were drawn to insert a Polish Home Army reconnaissance team, codename Lapwing, to investigate. But the order was rescinded 2 days later without explanation. Internal correspondence within SOE archives reveals only one note beside the cancellation. Operation superseded by higher authority. The higher authority was never identified. In January 1945, after the Soviet advance liberated much of central Poland, NKVD radio intercept teams also reported reception of an untraceable broadcast on nearly the same frequency. Their classified report, discovered decades later in Russian archives, described the signal as extremely stable, mechanical in rhythm, consistent with pre-war German transmission protocols, origin unverified. The Soviets deployed a detachment to the suspected sector. They found a small concrete structure, its entrance sealed by blast debris and frost. Inside were twisted remnants of field wiring, a burnt transmitter core, and traces of lead sheeting on the walls. The team's engineer, Captain Alexei Novikov, noted in his report, "Interior temperature anomalously low. Apparatus shows signs of prolonged power feed despite external destruction. Suggests source elsewhere." His file ends abruptly mid-sentence. A single addendum, handwritten in the margin, states, "Do not approach again. Contamination possible." After the war, as the Iron Curtain divided Europe, the ghost station faded into rumor, but the frequency did not. In 1948, a joint British-American monitoring program in Germany logged intermittent reappearance of the same transmission, identical tone, same intervals. A declassified CIA intercept log from 1952 recorded it for 137 consecutive hours before it abruptly ceased. Analysts noted a faint subcarrier, an embedded modulation resembling heartbeat pulses, too regular to be natural interference. Attempts to trace it failed. The engineers dubbed the subcarrier Echo 1. In 1963, a CIA memorandum labeled unrecoverable frequencies referenced a Vistula anomaly. Under subsection D, the report cited ongoing Soviet jamming operations targeting a legacy German broadcast believed to contain encoded technical data related to aerial guidance. That same year, the Polish People's Army undertook a classified demolition near the original coordinates, ostensibly to clear unexploded ordnance. Local witnesses describe military trucks arriving at night, digging for 2 days, then sealing the site under concrete. A former laborer, interviewed in 1981 by a Polish journalist, recalled strange wooden boxes stamped with Reich marks and new Soviet seals loaded into canvas-covered lorries. Shortly afterward, all official maps erased the access road to the site. During the Cold War, whispers of the ghost station resurfaced within the intelligence community. Some believed it had been part of the German Funkaufklärung network, an early automated relay chain meant to transmit pre-coded emergency orders if communication collapsed. Others speculated it was connected to Project Rundblickgerät, an experimental radar guidance system rumored to operate on harmonized frequencies along the Vistula defense line. No documentation confirmed either theory. In 1976, East German defectors provided fragments of a report allegedly prepared by the Stasi's Technical Operations Directorate. It described the rediscovery of a signal-emitting anomaly near the Vistula line and the recovery of electrical hardware of non-standard design. Photographs accompanying the report, later authenticated by Western analysts, showed heavy cylindrical transformers, partially melted, and circuit housings engraved with the letters BGS 440. This marking corresponds to Betriebsgruppe Spree, a clandestine Berlin-based electronics consortium dissolved in 1945, whose personnel later resurfaced in Soviet radar projects. After 1989, when the Iron Curtain lifted, Western journalists gained brief access to several abandoned Soviet sites in Poland. Among them was a decommissioned relay bunker 30 kilometers from the original ghost station coordinates. Within the bunker's command room lay a metal crate containing signal logs spanning 1949 to 1961. The entries meticulously recorded receptions of a German-origin beacon every equinox and solstice, always at identical intervals. One entry, dated June 21, 1957, included an annotation, amplitude diminishing, final sequence transmitted. Following that date, the transmissions ceased entirely. Today, the official archives acknowledge only fragmentary references to the case. The British National Archives maintain an empty file labelled Pol. Coms. Vistula 1944, transferred to Emod 1959. No follow-up exists. Freedom of information requests to both UK and Polish authorities yield identical responses. Records destroyed or classified under Allied agreements. Radio enthusiasts who have attempted to replicate the original frequency report a faint residual tone, a narrowband hiss recurring every 6 hours. Some dismiss it as atmospheric echo. Others claim it is an automated loop still cycling, somewhere deep underground. In 2002, the Institute of National Remembrance in Warsaw opened a dormant Soviet vault beneath the former Deblin Air Base. Among the decaying paper reels, investigators found fragments of telex messages dated 1945 to 46. One entry stands out. Transmission continues despite loss of generator. Suggest autonomous power. Order no personnel within 2 kilometers. The remainder of the page was destroyed by mildew. Yet in the lower corner, a single surviving word is legible in Russian ink. Chelovek, human. No definitive conclusion has ever been reached about the ghost station. What remains are coordinates erased from every official chart, a frequency that refuses to die, and the quiet conviction among those who listened longest that something or someone was trying to be heard long after the war had ended. To this day, late at night, faint signals still rise from the static of 6.772 MHz, unclaimed and untraceable, pulsing like the slow, enduring heart of a war that never completely stopped. Chapter 3. The Vanadium Project Files. In May 1944, Allied reconnaissance units advancing through southern France discovered a network of sealed railway tunnels near the village of Saint-Laurent-de-Cerdance. The entrances had been intentionally collapsed with shaped charges, but aerial photos revealed the faint outline of an underground facility stretching beneath the Pyrenean foothills. When the Free French forces finally breached the tunnel system after liberation, they found an array of workbenches, broken centrifuges, and the remains of a high-voltage generator fused by fire. At the far end of the complex were 16 crates, each marked with the IG Farben insignia and the codename Project Vanadium. The crates were immediately seized under the authority of the Allied Technical Intelligence Unit, Section E. Within hours, all documentation regarding their discovery disappeared into a sealed US transport manifest. Officially, Project Vanadium was recorded as an industrial metallurgy experiment, one of countless dead-end wartime pursuits. Yet the surviving field reports tell another story. A typed note by Captain Lawrence Morrow, dated June 12, 1944, reads, "Material exhibits anomalous heat resistance. Alloy unable to melt under sustained acetylene exposure. Emits faint blue luminescence when cut." The note is unsigned, but bears the initials LM. In the weeks following its discovery, the crates were transferred to an airfield in Nice under escort by the 313th Air Transport Command and flown to an undisclosed destination in the United States. The shipping record ends there. Post-war, scattered references to vanadium reappear in American internal memoranda. A 1947 report from the newly formed US Air Force Materials Laboratory lists unidentified high-temperature alloys recovered from European theater. In margin notes, one scientist writes, "Sample demonstrates phase stability at 3100 degrees. No known composition in domestic catalogues." Around the same time, technical drawings labelled V12 reactor sheathing surface in an Army Ordnance archive, then vanish after being reclassified under AC priority code Sigma 2 Quant, typically reserved for nuclear propulsion research. None of the personnel who handled those samples ever discussed their findings publicly. One of the few testimonies comes from Lieutenant Commander Edward Wolfe, formerly of the US Naval Research Laboratory. In a 1965 oral history interview, later redacted, he described examining a metallic composite, grey with a faint green tint, lighter than aluminum but harder than tungsten. Wolf claimed it was retrieved from a French cache and tested for possible use in high-temperature exhaust systems. He recalled the name Vanadium, written on the crate in black stencil. When the interviewer asked for further clarification, the recording abruptly cuts, replaced by a typed notice. Segment withheld for reasons of national security. French archives contain their own traces of the mystery. In 1946, a Ministry of Reconstruction memo referenced the American appropriation of industrial materials from site Saint-Laurent-Sea. The French scientist supervising the post-liberation inspection, Dr. Henri Duval, wrote to his superior protesting the removal. These samples are of extraordinary structure, non-ferrous, unusually light, magnetic yet non-conductive. They were taken without proper record. I fear the Americans misunderstand their significance. Duval's correspondence ends in December 1946. 2 months later, his name appears on a passenger manifest to Washington, D.C., traveling as part of a technical exchange delegation. No record shows he ever returned to France. In 1951, U.S. Senate hearings on defense procurement briefly touched upon an unacknowledged program called Project Vanadium. Senator Clinton Anderson questioned whether funds were being diverted to a private metallurgical initiative tied to former IG Farben personnel. The Defense Department responded that vanadium was a misidentified file concerning stainless steel production. Nonetheless, an internal Air Force memo dated the same year discusses controlled fabrication under NACA supervision using remaining V-series alloys. The same memo references unknown fatigue limit achieved under hypersonic flow conditions, a phrase decades ahead of its time. By 1957, vanadium's trail intersected with the birth of the American space program. Among the unclassified remains of the NACA-NASA transition files is a single requisition slip for thermoresistant sheet metal, serial V12A, experimental origin ATC-UR. The supplier field is blacked out. Metallurgical analysis appended to the slip lists a density inconsistent with any recorded alloy. The sample was logged at the Langley Research Center and then transferred to higher authority, a euphemism historians recognize as relocation to military custody. 2 months later, NASA engineers working on supersonic prototypes reported receiving a proprietary alloy capable of withstanding unprecedented heat stress. The correlation remains speculative but eerily suggestive. Meanwhile, European rumor began to circulate about missing German metallurgists. Between June and August 1945, 5 scientists associated with IG Farben's Synthetic Materials Division, Dr. Wilhelm Enders, Otto Kaufmann, Helmut Riedel, Ernst Schulte, and one known only as Bayer, were listed as captured by French forces en route to interrogation at Marseille. Their transport convoy vanished south of Lyon. French military police logged no incident. Decades later, fragments of an American immigration record from 1947 list 3 of those names entering under new identities via Operation Paperclip. The other 2 were never traced. An intriguing clue surfaces in a 1974 internal audit from the Department of Energy. Among unindexed archives stored at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, inspectors found a crate labeled Vanadium, property of USAF, 1945 vires. Inside were metallic rods of indeterminate origin, each sheathed in resin. When the rods were exposed to air, a soft luminescence was recorded, and the material emitted faint magnetic fluctuations. The crate was resealed and the report was classified. Only one note remains legible in the summary. May represent early attempt at plasma containment. Independent researchers later compared surviving descriptions of vanadium alloy to data from early, high-speed test crashes in the Nevada desert during 1949-50. A metallurgical survey of one such wreckage, an unacknowledged supersonic test aircraft, revealed trace vanadium content at levels impossible to achieve through conventional smelting of the era. The alloy's isotopic ratios mirrored those of European industrial processes documented in wartime Germany. Analysts concluded that some portion of vanadium's material had been incorporated into the earliest experimental airframes. The official record dismisses these claims as fabrication, yet none of the engineers involved have denied them. In the early 2000s, a declassified cache from the French intelligence service, the SDECE, disclosed fragments of a 1944 interrogation transcript with a captured IG Farben engineer, Dr. Otto Haller. When asked to define Project Vanadium, Haller replied, It is a method to stabilize combustion without fuel, energy drawn from phase transition of atmosphere. The interrogator wrote a single comment: nonsense. But in the final paragraph of the transcript, Haller added, "The process failed. The material remains indestructible. If the Americans find it, they will not be able to stop it either." Today, all surviving documentation of vanadium remains sequestered in sealed storage at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, under the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. The files are not accessible under FOIA. Unofficially, retired technicians speak of the alloy that couldn't be cut, and of late-night visitors from unnamed agencies who sampled the air around sealed crates. A single digital record, uploaded anonymously in 2015, shows a scan of a damaged blueprint. A circular chamber labeled Containment Vessel V. In the corner, stamped faintly beneath layers of dust, is a serial number: SLC Hearts 45. That same code, historians note, corresponds to a forgotten OSS operation from April 1945, its name still redacted under Harbinger. Chapter 4. Operation Silent Chapel. In March 1953, amid the growing paranoia of the Cold War, a joint CIA-BND task force initiated a classified counterintelligence sweep deep in the Black Forest. Officially, it was designated as Operation Silent Chapel, a surgical effort to locate and dismantle post-war Nazi espionage cells allegedly funneling information through West German industry. In reality, as internal memoranda later revealed, its true directive had little to do with counter-espionage. The operation's central target was not human intelligence networks, but an archive, a cache of photographic reconnaissance materials buried since 1945, known to a handful of surviving SS officers by the codename Die Glock-Kassetten. According to declassified fragments of CIA case file from 4127B, the Silent Chapel team comprised 12 personnel drawn from technical services, psychological operations, and the BND's fledgling Shadow Bureau under Reinhard Gehlen. They established a forward command post in Triberg, a quiet spa town known for its deep valleys and abandoned wartime bunkers. Local police records show American trucks arriving without insignia on the evening of March 11, 1953. Witnesses described uniformed men erecting perimeter fencing and cutting telephone lines. Within 48 hours, the forest was sealed. No civilian entry permitted. The official explanation: military training exercise. At the heart of the operation lay the testimony of a former Luftwaffe photographic officer, Karl Weissmann, captured in 1945 and interned at Camp Ritchie. Weissmann claimed to have overseen film reels recorded over the North Sea between 1943 and 1944. The footage, he stated, showed Allied bombers destroyed mid-flight by unidentified luminous ordnance far beyond known weapons performance. The films were supposedly stored in a subterranean vault near Triberg, sealed under SS authority as Germany collapsed. When interviewed by US intelligence, Weissmann offered a crude sketch of the storage chamber, circular, concrete, with a steel hatch marked Project Nachtauge, Night Eye. His interrogation file, recovered decades later, bears a marginal note in red pencil: Silent Chapel to verify. For years, Silent Chapel remained little more than rumor, but the 1953 operation unfolded with calculated precision. Field reports obtained through the German Federal Archive describe localized power surges and high-frequency interference during excavation. One transmission, marked urgent, records team leader Captain Andrew Mulligan, stating, "We've reached the outer seal. Internal readings unstable. Request containment equipment." Hours later, communications ceased. The final log entry from the command post radio reads simply, "Silence confirmed." When local authorities were allowed back into the forest a week later, they found the clearing deserted. Machinery lay abandoned, some equipment partially melted as if exposed to extreme heat. Triberg residents reported hearing a low hum, like power lines under strain, followed by a flash of blue light above the tree line. Inquiries made through official NATO channels produced identical responses. No record of any joint operation conducted in the Black Forest sector during March 1953. Yet, internal BND maintenance requisitions from April 1953 list vehicle decontamination, Triberg site, coded as Material 27 Bio. That notation was typically reserved for chemical or radiological exposure. The operation's aftermath became further entangled when, later that year, the US Embassy in Bonn received a classified communiqué from General Lucius Clay's former office warning of unauthorized engagement involving American personnel operating under non-declared command. The attached summary references unconfirmed fatalities and the interception of prohibited materials now under custody of unidentified US detachment. The memo's closing line recommends suppression under Article 7. NATO security provisions. From that moment, the name Silent Chapel vanished from all operational indexes. Throughout the 1960s, whispers of the lost mission circulated among intelligence veterans. One retired CIA field engineer, William Stratton, recounted in a private 1972 interview that he had seen film reels from a German camera, images too sharp for 1940s technology. Stratton described frames depicting aerial combat above cloud-level bright spherical bursts, striking bomber formations from impossible angles. "We thought they were fakes," he said. "Then they showed the heat patterns. They matched nuclear bloom profiles." But that was 1943. His remarks were never officially published. 2 weeks after the interview, Stratton died of a sudden aneurysm. His personal notes were seized by federal agents. The only physical remnant associated with Operation Silent Chapel appeared in 1984, when a forestry crew unearthed a rusted steel hatch deep within the Triberg woods. The hatch bore a stenciled eagle emblem, partially obscured by corrosion. And beneath it, faintly visible, the words Nachtresor A9. Inside lay nothing but a collapsed tunnel and an empty film canister marked Reich Luftbilddienst. Within hours of the discovery, German authorities sealed the site, citing hazardous contamination. The area was later fenced and reclassified as environmental remediation property, maintained by a private firm registered in Delaware. Documents leaked in 1999 from within the German Federal Intelligence Service briefly reopened the case. Among them was a scanned typewritten summary titled Nachbericht, Schweigekapelle, after report Silent Chapel. The document, dated July 1953, contained 6 pages, 5 of which were completely redacted. The sole surviving paragraph reads, "Photographic material successfully recovered. Exposure presents unknown energy pattern inconsistent with optical phenomena. All personnel with direct contact deceased within 48 hours. Recommend indefinite isolation of material under sovereign custody." The document was authenticated but swiftly reclassified. A deeper mystery surrounds the fate of the recovered reels themselves. Unconfirmed accounts place them within the United States by late 1953, under the control of the Defense Intelligence Agency's predecessor, the Armed Forces Security Agency. The reels were allegedly stored at a facility in Maryland under the catalog name Film Set 9-C. Atmospheric phenomena, German origin. None have ever resurfaced. However, in a 1978 inventory audit at Fort Meade, archivists noted missing canisters corresponding to that classification. The oversight was explained as a labeling discrepancy. In 2010, an investigative journalist obtained partial coordinates from a declassified NATO logistics manifest. The coordinates pointed once again to Triberg, to the very same forest clearing sealed nearly 60 years earlier. Satellite imagery reveals faint subsidence in the terrain, suggesting an underground chamber. Ground-penetrating radar, performed discreetly by civilian researchers, indicated a hollow cavity approximately 20 meters below the surface. Attempts to excavate have been repeatedly blocked by environmental protection injunctions. The fence still stands, patrolled irregularly by contractors with no registered parent company. The modern BND refuses comment. The CIA, when approached under FOIA, responded only that Operation Silent Chapel remains classified under mutual defense protocols. Whatever the true contents of the Die Glocke Kassetten, their recovery clearly exacted a cost measured in both secrecy and human life. Some within the intelligence community whisper that the reels captured not weapon tests, but evidence of an experiment the Allies could never publicly acknowledge, a weaponization of energy that defied known physics. Others believe Silent Chapel's purpose was containment, not acquisition. Standing today at the edge of that Black Forest clearing, one might still sense a low vibration underfoot, a hum faint as breath, rising through soil and moss. Whether it is mere wind trapped in the tunnels or the residue of something that once pulsed with power is impossible to say. What remains certain is this: the chapel was silent not because no one spoke, but because too many did, and then were made to vanish. Chapter 5. The Red Meridian Deception. In December 1948, as Europe lay divided under occupation zones and suspicion hardened into iron borders, a sequence of intercepted Soviet communications reached British monitoring stations in Cyprus and Malta. The decrypted messages referenced a covert undertaking known only as the Red Meridian Protocol. The fragments, scrambled military shorthand half in codebook numerals, appeared to detail a joint Soviet-Yugoslav mission to recover B material from an abandoned German laboratory in Linz, Austria. British intelligence analysts were uncertain whether the term referred to biological stock, chemical weapons, or captured technology. Within days, GCHQ marked the intercept extremely sensitive and forwarded it to the Foreign Office with the notation, "Possible post-war recovery of Axis research." The Linz facility in question had been listed among dozens of underground manufacturing sites destroyed during Allied bombing in 1945, known as Work 12B. It was originally operated by Steyr-Daimler-Puch under SS supervision. Post-war occupation records show the site as collapsed and sealed by American engineers. Yet, in early 1949, an Austrian rail inspector reported renewed activity near the old access tunnel, fresh tire tracks, floodlights, and military vehicles with no insignia. Local gendarmerie were instructed not to approach. A month later, Soviet convoy logs show multiple heavy trucks departing Linz for Odessa via Hungary, carrying sealed scientific cargo. Every record lists the same destination: Meridian Depot. By March 1949, MI6 field reports confirmed that the Soviet Ministry of Internal Affairs, MVD, had activated a special retrieval unit under the cover of a sanitation brigade. The unit's leader, Colonel Sergei Demidov, had previously served in biological research oversight at Kirov. His detachment consisted of 12 men and 3 civilian scientists of German origin, none of whom were registered under occupation law. The British liaison officer in Vienna sent an urgent cable describing movement of restricted Axis personnel under Soviet protection, warning that former SS technical staff appeared to be operating freely behind the lines. His report received no acknowledgement. 3 weeks later, the first outbreak occurred. Dock workers in Constanța, Romania, where the convoys reportedly transferred cargo onto a Soviet freighter, were hospitalized with acute radiation-like symptoms: hair loss, internal hemorrhaging, burns without heat. The official explanation cited industrial contamination. Medical records were confiscated within hours by Soviet security officers. The ship, Neva Star, departed the same night, bound for Odessa. It was never logged as arriving. In April 1949, an MI5 memorandum titled Red Meridian Preliminary Analysis compiled all known references to the operation. Among the included documents was a recovered Soviet field report captured during a border skirmish near Trieste, describing containment instability and loss of 3 handlers during transfer. The remaining lines are unreadable, obscured by water damage. One surviving phrase stands out: biological element partially active, radiogenic properties confirmed. The memo concludes that the Soviets may have obtained a hybrid research material bridging biochemistry and radiological studies, likely of German origin. The matter was elevated to the Joint Intelligence Committee and promptly classified top secret. Meanwhile, Yugoslav archives from 1950 reference a Red Meridian agreement between Belgrade and Moscow, suspended following the Tito-Stalin split. A surviving telegram from Tito's office complains of unacceptable Soviet secrecy regarding cargo removed from Linz, possible exposure of Yugoslav personnel. This rupture may explain why, after 1950, no further Soviet activity was recorded at the Austrian site. The tunnels were dynamited, their entrances buried under tons of rock, and the location omitted from all subsequent reconstruction maps. American records hint at parallel awareness. In 1951, a restricted State Department brief mentions evidence of continued Soviet experimentation with recovered Axis biomaterials, possibly involving autonomous containment media. The document speculates that the technology originated from late-war German research into self-sustaining chemical reactions, an area intersecting with Nazi programs on biological resilience and atmospheric sterilization. The author of the brief, a Dr. Leland Cross from Fort Detrick, later became known for his work on aerosolized bacteriological agents. When asked in 1969 about Red Meridian, Cross responded only, "That was before we understood how deep the contamination ran." Testimonies from defector scientists strengthen the connection. In 1964, Soviet microbiologist Alexei Kravchenko, who fled to Norway, claimed his department had received sealed vials of unknown suspension, labeled B material, LINS. He described them as transparent cylinders containing granular fluid that remained cold without refrigeration. Within weeks of unsealing, he said, laboratory personnel experienced severe illness, and the samples were removed by KGB officers wearing lead-lined suits. His statement was dismissed as exaggeration, yet Norwegian intelligence preserved it. Marginal notes in Kravchenko's file link his description to early Soviet radiation biophysics research, classified under the codename Project Meridian. A declassified 1958 British Navy intelligence report may offer the final trace. While surveying the Black Sea for potential submarine routes, sonar operators detected an anomalous metallic mass resting at 70 meters depth, approximately 60 kilometers off the Odessa coast. Divers dispatched to the site described a submerged cargo structure, rectangular, approximately 20 meters in length, marked with Cyrillic hazard symbols. Due to hazardous readings, the object was left undisturbed. Coordinates matched the last known path of the missing Neva star. By 1960, the Red Meridian Protocol had vanished from all intelligence bulletins. Files were consolidated under general Cold War biological warfare categories. When declassification began in the 1990s, researchers found only fragments, letters between analysts debating whether Red Meridian represented a recovery of human experimentation data or physical bioweapon. Samples. The truth remains obscured by half-legible ciphers and redacted paragraphs. Modern historians attempting to reconstruct the timeline note the recurring presence of certain chemical markers, vanadium, lithium, and unusual isotopic traces consistent with the Hartz and Saint Laurent extractions conducted in 1945 and 1944 respectively. Whether coincidence or continuity, the pattern suggests that Red Meridian may not have been an isolated Soviet project, but part of a much older network of clandestine retrievals, perhaps even a continuation of whatever began under Operation Harbinger. In 2015, Ukrainian divers exploring the wreck site of the Neva star claimed to recover fragments of lead shielding and ceramic tubing, unlike standard cargo. Samples were confiscated by government authorities and transferred to undisclosed custody. The divers' footage shows a blurred image of Cyrillic text on one fragment. Meridian 2. That is, Meridian 2. The wreck was sealed again under the pretense of ecological protection. The name Red Meridian survives today only in rumor, passed among intelligence archivists who trade in lost Cold War myths. To them, it signifies the line dividing history, as written from the history that still leaks through declassified ink. Whether the B material was biological, radiological, or something in between remains unknown. But the disease reports, the missing ships, and the soil readings near Linz all point toward one conclusion. Something was recovered that never should have been touched, and someone, somewhere east of the old Iron Curtain, may still be studying how to make it live again. Closing hook. Even now, fragments of those buried operations flicker through the black corridors of military history. Harbinger, Saint Laurent, Vortex, Scepter, and Red Meridian, threads of a pattern that never officially existed. Each sealed vault, each redacted file, each vanished witness forms a map of silence drawn across continents. Somewhere within that map, the truth remains interred. Technologies that defied their era, crimes erased beneath patriotic justification, and the men who carried them from ruin into secrecy. The war ended on paper in 1945, but the shadow it cast continued in laboratories, bunkers, and diplomatic couriers for decades after. The question left unanswered is not what they found, but whether it ever stopped working.